Afternoon. This is your host, Michael J. Long, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. It's March the 4th of 2020. Actually, it's May 4th, 2020. So it's at 4:27 p.m. It's May 4th, 2020, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. So, for those of you that well, so last time I did this podcast, I had a guest on, and it went rather well, actually. But today I'm going to do a kind of a solo live stream. So bear with me. Um, so the first thing I wanted to go over is, well, I kind of did this already for my talk show. I mean, or with my podcast show, Michael J. Long on the Issues podcast, which you can listen to on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and other at least seven or six other sources. Where I did an entire podcast show um, dedicated to exposing the amount of government agencies that we have through at the federal level through the federal government, and most of them, if they're not already top secret, but most of them are already publicly listed under through this source that lists every single government agency from A to Z through USA. No, it's not. It wouldn't be USA.gov. It's USA.gov. All right. So, in order for me to, let me go on the website and then I'll show you guys exactly what I'm talking about here because they have a list of government agencies from A to Z, um, and some of it, you know, you might question, be like, well, hey, what's with all these government agencies? And you might say, Michael Long, how big is the federal government if you're interested in this stuff? And or you might say, well, we might need all this stuff. But first of all, without further ado, I'd like to present the agencies from A to Z and read to you all, and this is how big the federal government is. All right. This is how huge it is. So we start out, these are the amount of government, these are the amount of government agencies, boards, directors. These are the amount of government agencies and boards and commissions that we have on the federal level. This is almost every single federal government agency. And apparently there's an agency from A to Z for almost every single letter of the alphabet. So we begin with the letter A, which of course includes the Air Force, which was established in 1947. So that's clearly understandable that we have an Air Force, an Army and Navy, a Marine Corps. So, or like, but it's all these other agencies it's like, that you might wonder, like, why do we need them, right? So we start out with the Ability One Commission, and then we end up with the Access Board, the Administration for Children and Families, Administration for Community Living, Administration for Native Americans, Administration Conference of the United States, the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts. Now, the courts, I can at least agree with. It's understandable we need courts for adjudication in criminal cases and etc. We need a system of rule, law, and order. So to have courts established, to have a legislative branch, the House, the Senate, to have the office of the presidency to preside over, all that, and then you have the Supreme Court and the courts, the lower courts, and all that below it. That's understandable, but you have all these other government agencies in the executive branch, and it actually makes the executive branch a little All right, so let me clarify this. You have the Ability One Commission, the Access Board, the Administration for Children and Families. You have the Administration for Community Living, Administration for Native Americans, Native Administrative Conference of the United States, the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts. And then you have the Advisory Council on Historic Preservations, the African Development Foundation. So I don't even know why they would have a foundation unless it's a program that we pour massive amounts of funding to, and so they list that program as a government agency or entity. Otherwise, I don't know why they would have that linked with government agencies. And then they have the Agency for Global Media, and then they have the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, the Agency for International Development. I mean, you got to ask yourself, why do we have an agency for international development? The agent, and of course, Interpol, that's the international police that investigates crimes internationally, violent offenses, as far as I know. So at least if we agreed with other countries, we should have international police, not so much investigate the affairs of other countries, but investigate, violent crimes and offenses or whatever relating to the treaty or whatnot, and fight terrorism or what have you, so that and enforce international law upon. I don't know. I guess it's a good idea to have Interpol, but the agency for healthcare research and quality, I would look into abolishing that agency. And of course, the Department of Education, but that's under E, I think. So you have and I'd probably also get rid of the Ability One Commission, the Access Board, the Administration for Children and Families, the Administration for Community Living, Administration for Native Americans, Administrative Conference of the United States, the Ability Council of Historic Preservation, the African Development Foundation, I would privatize and not fund. The Agency for Global Media, I would abolish that agency, and that's if I were elected president. If I were elected to Congress, I would definitely consider proposing legislation to do so, to get rid of some of these agencies. That also includes the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, Agency for International Development, Agency for Toxic and Substance. Okay, so now we have also an Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. Now, are those people also going to go after people who use drugs? I don't know. Like, do they have their own police force? Then you have the Agriculture Marketing Services, the Agriculture Research Service, the Agriculture Department, or the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, the Agriculture Library, and then you have the Air Force Reserves and the Air Force, which is understandable. I'd keep those two. Now you have the Alcohol and Tobacco and Tax and Trade Bureau, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives Bureau, Aloha TV, American Battle Monuments Commission, America Corps, Amtrak, Animal and Planet Health Inspection Services. I mean, Antitrust Division, Application Regional Commission, the Architect of the Capitol, the Archives, National Archives and Records Administration, the Arctic Research Commission, the Armed Forces Retirement. Well, the Armed Control and International Security. I don't know, like you get my drift, right? The authorized, yeah. I mean, there's just so many government agencies, and it goes on. You have let's see here, Barry M. Goldwater Scholarship and Excellence in Education Program. I think that should be privatized. I don't think there should, you know, Bonneville Program Power Administration. So I guess that also includes the Department of Energy. Baltic Garden, the Bureau of Alcohol, Firearms and Explosives, the Bureau of Consular Affairs, the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection Agency, the Bureau of Economic Analysts, the Bureau of Engraving and Painting, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Bureau of Industry and Securities, the Bureau of International Labor Affairs, the Bureau of Statistics, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the Bureau of Prisons, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, BSEE, the Bureau of the Census, the Bureau of the Fiscal Services, the Bureau of the Transportation and Statistics. Now, the thing about the census is that shouldn't, I mean, while the government is required to collect a census on the people in under the U.S. Constitution to determine how many seats are in the House and the Senate, that can be done with a private agency, and can be reported to the president and to the Congress through a private company. And I think the census on top of that should be 100% voluntary. So if you and I believe it is for the most part. So if you're not counted, then you know you know. But I think they manipulate that. I don't really think we need to have a bureau of census, but nonetheless it exists. And then you also have the Capitol Police, the Capitol Visitor Center, the career technical and adult education. Oh, maybe we can afford to privatize that. The career and technical and adult education office, maybe. As well as the USPS, the VA, the National Weather Service, which I know is going to be under N. Uh, let's see, the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. We can get rid of that program. The Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion, the Center for Permanent Information and Research, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Yeah, the CDC, hence that we can get rid of. The Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, which also manages Medicaid and Medicare. Medicaid is managed by the states. Medicare is managed at the federal level. They're both over. But I don't think those programs should be overseen by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. I would think that the Medicaid and Medicare programs can be overseen through a private company rather than an agency, but that was not their intent when they came up with those programs. So on top of that, you have Central Command or CENTCOM. So I guess that's a military thing. The Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. Yeah, we can definitely abolish the CIA. The Chemical Safety Board, which we can definitely get rid of. The Chief Acquisition Officers Council, the Chief Financial Officers Council, the Chief Human Capital Officers Council, the Chief Information Officers, Child Support Enforcement, Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee, Citizenship and Immigration Services, Civil Rights Division, Department of Justice, Civil Rights Department of Education of the Civil Rights Department of Health and Human Services, Office for Coast Guards, Commerce Department, Commission of Fine Arts, Commission of Civil Rights, Commission on International Religious Freedom, Commission on Presidential Scholars, Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe, the Committee for the Implementation of Textile Agreements, the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the Community-Oriented Policing Services, the Community Planning and Development, Compliance of the Comptroller of the Currency Office of the Computer Energy Readiness Team, or USCERT. And then you have the Consular Affairs Bureau, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and it goes all the way down the line. The Corporation for National and Community Service, Corps of Engineers, the Council of Economic Advisors, the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, the Council on Environmental Quality. Let's see here. Customs and Border Protection, Cybersecurity Infrastructures and Security Agencies. And it also includes the Debt and Claims Management Center, Defense Acquisition University, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA. Okay, and DARPA apparently has all these other top secret programs, supposedly, as well as the Pentagon and the Defense Commissionary Agency, the Defense Contract Audit Agency, the Defense Contract Management Agency, the Defense Department, the Defense Finance According Services, Defense Finance Accounting Services, Debt Claims and Management Centers, the Defense Health Agency, the Defense Information Systems Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, Defense Logistics Agency. It goes the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board, the Defense Security Corporation Agency, the Defense Security Services, the Defense Technical Information Center, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the Delaware River Basin Commission, the Delta Regional Authority, the Delta Commission, the Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, Department of Education, Energy, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Housing and Urban Development, Department of Justice, Department of Labor, Department of State, Department of the Interior, Department of Treasury, Department of Transportation, Department of Veteran Affairs. I think the Veteran Affairs they can privatize. The Department of National Intelligence Office, the Disability Employment Policy Office of the Drug Enforcement Agency, or the DEA. Oh my gosh. And then with E, you have the Economic Analyst Bureau, the Economic Development Administration, Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment, Economic Research Service, Education Department, of course, we can afford to get rid of, the Elder Justice Institute, the Election Assistance Commission, the Elementary and Secondary Education Office of Employee Benefits, oh my lord, employment, and so we got agencies for everything. Energy Department, Energy Information Administration, the yeah. And then I thought that, and I really thought that the STAR program was actually a state program in New York. Apparently, it's a federal program. The English Language Acquisition Office, really? As if we got to have an language division within the federal government to enforce the rules of the English language? That, you know, English has to be the official language of the United States, so we're going to have a department that deals with that, really? The Engraving and Printing Bureau, I just mentioned that. And then let's see what the European Command, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Environmental Management Office, the Export-Import Bank of the United States. So then you have Freddie Mae, Farm Credit Administration, Farm Credit System Insurance Corporation. So I'm guessing they get massive funding from the federal government and qualifies as a federal program, I guess. Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board, Federal Aviation Administration. Yeah, I can definitely see abolishing the Federal Aviation Administration, being that the airlines really should be privatized. The Federal Bureau of Investigations, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the Federal Citizens Information Center, the Federal Commission, the Federal Consulting Group, the Federal Insurance Corporation, FDIC, the Federal Election Commission, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the Federal Executive Boards, the Federal Finance Institutions and Examines Councils, the Federal Financing Bank, the Federal Geographic Data Committee, the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, or Freddie Mac, the Federal Housing Administration, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, federal labor, federal laboratory, federal law enforcement training center, federal library information center committee, federal maritime commission, federal mediation and consultation service, the federal main safety and health and review commission, the federal motor carrier safety administration, the federal national mortgage association, Fannie Mae, the Federal Protective Services, the Federal Railroad Administration. Let's see, Federal Register, so I'm guessing that's for the sex offenders, the Federal Reserve System. Yeah, and that's the thing about the Federal Register. We don't need it. It should be abolished. We spend way too much money on a lot of these agencies, if not almost all of them. The Federal Student Aid Information Center, the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, and just look at all these agencies we have: the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, the Federal Transit Administration, the Federal Voting Assist, the FedStats, the Fire Administration, or the USFA. So we got to have a fire administration too. The Fiscal Service Bureau of the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Forest Fleet Command, the Food and Agriculture National Institute of the Food and Drug Administration, the Food and Nutrition Services, Food and Safety Inspection Services. It goes on and on. The Forest Service, the Fossil Energy, the Freddie Mac. Let's see what G holds. So as you can see, there's the General Service Administration, the Geographical Service, the Government Accountability Office, the Government Ethics Office, the Government National Mortgage Association, the Government Publishing Office, the Grain Inspection, Packers and Stockyards Administration, and let's see what H is. So then you have the Hanukkah Commission, the Holocaust. Really? I mean, all right, let's see. Although I agree with having the Holocaust Memorial Museum, I think for the most part that is a private thing, but we might be giving them some type of money, so that's probably why it's listed here, because it says government agencies and elected officials that we're looking at here. All right, House and Urban Development, or HUD, and then you have these three agencies here: the Immigration and Employee Rights Section, Immigration Citizenship Service, Immigration Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Yeah, I can see retaining ICE, but in the Indian Affairs, the Indian Arts and Crafts Board, then you have the Indian Health Services, the Indoor Air Quality. Is that even an agency at the federal level? Or is that some type of program that I don't know. I can't keep up with it all. The Industrial College of the Armed Forces, the Industrial Security, okay, the Information Resource Information College, the Innovation Improvement Office, the Inspectors General, the Institute of Education Science. So, I mean, I guess they have these programs too that they fund, or I don't know. I'm guessing the Holocaust Memorial Museum can do just fine without federal funding or needing to be a federal program. Then you have the Institute for Peace, the Inter-American Foundation, and lastly you have Interpol. Which I kind of agree with Interpol, but the International Trade Commission, the International Trade ITA, I can see getting rid of them agencies. The International Labor Affairs Bureau of, the International Revenue Service, the Interior Department. And so the James managed the the Japan United States Friendship Commission. Why do we need to have a commission for friendship with other countries? Job Corps, which I think should be a private thing. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies. Okay, but okay, I can definitely see that. The Joint Military Intelligence College, but all right. Let's see what K is. You have the Kennedy Center, the Labor Department, Labor Statistics, Labor Man. Again, the Labor Bureau of Land Management. Um, A, B, and then M. You have the manufactured housing programs, marketing. So meat and poultry hotline. So is that what we're paying? Mediation consultation. Merit Systems Protection Board. Again, with the commissions and committees. The Middle East Broadcasting Networks. The Migratory Bird Conservation Commission. The Military Postal Service Agency. The Millennium Challenge Corporation. The Mint. Let's see what N has. Oh yeah, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, the National Agriculture Statistics Services, the National Archives and Records Administration, the National Cancer, okay, the National Capital Planning Commission, the National Cemetery Administration, the National Consultation Center, National Council on National Credit Union Administration, National Defense University, National Defense University I College, National Guard of Art, the National Health Information Center, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Let's see here. National Indian Gaming Commission, National Institute of Arthritis. Well, I would think that the National Institute of Arthritis is already a private entity. The National Institute of Defense and Other Communications. Or deafness. Maybe I misread that one there. Look, so these are all institutes. The National Institute. All right, well, here's a government agency right here. The National Intelligence. No, that's a university. The National Integrity Fire Center. Okay, yeah. The National Labor Relations Board. The National Laboratories, the National Library of Agriculture, National Marine Fisheries Service, at your service, the National Mediation Board, the National Nuclear Security Administration, the National Ocean Service, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So that we can even privatize. The National Park Foundation, yeah, we can get rid of it. The National Park Services, the National Passport Center, the National Prevention and let's see here. Not so many government agencies with the letter N. Oh wait, I found one. The National Security Agency. See, they're hidden. You gotta look for them. The National Security Council. The National Telecommunication and Information Administration, the National Transportation Safety Board, the National Resource Conservation Service, the Natural Resource Revenue Office of. So you have the NOAA Fisheries and Northern Border Region, Northern Command, Northwest Power and Conservation Council, Northwest Power Planning. So there you have it. That's the letter N. O. No thanks. Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, Ocean Energy Management Bureau of Civil Rights, There's another one: Office of Child Support Enforcement, Office of Community Planning and Development, the Office of Compliance, the Office of Cuba Broadcasting, which I don't think we need to have an Office of Cuba Broadcasting. I think a private company can do that. The Office of Economic Adjustment, the Office of Employment, the Office of Office of Government Ethics, Office of Fossil Fuels. You see, they got an agency for everything. The Office of Fair Housing, the Office of Housing, Office of Government Ethics, and it goes all the way down the line. Office of Juvenile, okay. The um, the Office of Nuclear Energy. Yeah, there's an office for wow. Oh, the CDC, the Director of National Intelligence, the Federal Register, yeah, Pacific Command, Pacific Northwest Electric Power and Conservation Plan, Pardon Attorney, Parent Information Resource, and Pro Commission, Patent and Trademark Office. Okay, so is that I don't even know if that's even a federal agency, commission, or board or not. Maybe that could be. All right, Peace Corps. The pension benefit. So there's the Pentagon Force Protection Agency, the Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration. So anything with administration or agency, board, commission, you pretty much know is going to be a government like agency, board, commission, or some type of government entity. Uh, and in some of these other programs, private programs they have listed on here are apparently programs that we fund massively, so we could affordably put it on there. Then you have Radio and TV MARTA, Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Europe. So those you can bet are government programs. Radio SWA, Railway. Wow. And I think ours is the shortest one on the list. Safety and Environmental Enforcement Bureau, the St. Louis Science and Technology Policy Office, the Science Office, uh, Seafood Inspection Program, Secret Service, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Selective Service System. Let's see here. There's a commission for sentencing, so really the courts can't do that, you know? Southern Command, Southwestern. This is one hell of a list. Let's see what else there is. Number T, letter T. Taxpayer Advisory Trade Representatives. So, and this is every single department with US on it. That's what the letter U is, plus the US.gov. I guess if you want government transparent government, USA.gov is the way to go. But Voice of America. But you can see just how powerful the government is. It's just so powerful that it's like nothing. It's like this. The bigger the government, the bigger the federal government, and the more agencies, boards, commissions that you have. This even goes as far as the Federal Election Commission, which I think is also on there, the Federal Election Commission. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the Federal Election Commission. They got established, I think, after Ross Perot in the late '90s or the early to mid '90s rather, because they didn't like the way the League of Women Voters were doing things. And to be honest with you, it's more because they wanted to protect the Democrats and the Republican Party, so they came up with that commission. That commission, the Federal Election Commission, has also determined in recent years that in order to get into the debates, that not only do you have to be in enough ballots to win the presidency in enough states, you also have to have 15% in the certified polls that they approve of, which is usually MSNBC, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, Fox News. Maybe it's even One America News, but who knows? But it damn sure ain't a independent libertarian media outlet, because the libertarians would have libertarian candidates on the polls all the time. So, and then every poll that these third party candidates like the Libertarian Party are included in, they're oftentimes low on the polls. They're not included in so many polls. So their voices aren't as out there as one would expect. But that gives you the just a glance of just how come that when you have more government agencies, more boards, more commissions for almost every little thing in society, that you have this bigger and bigger mess, which tightens the reins of controls of government, onto which people lose their freedoms. We lose our freedoms, our civil liberties, our rights, or they get dramatically reduced for every time we pass a law or create something that counteracts with the Constitution, or yet alone, through Congress, or allow the president to sign executive orders, which was originally intended for government agencies and not to be directed upon the people. But apparently now the people, it's like this: the bigger the government, the less free you are. Or at least that's my philosophy behind why we probably shouldn't have so many government agencies. It's just so big. It's just so massive. It's like, it's like, wow, you know? So to summarize this, you have the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, Department of Education, Department of Labor, Department of Housing and Urban Development, and that's just to name a few. And you have all the Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Europe. We have military all over the world. So what we got here is a mess, just to sum it up. And it's one huge mess that we're paying trillions of dollars towards, on top of the fact, it costs billions of dollars to keep every single government agency, commission, board, directory service, on and on and on and on. And we're borrowing money from China to keep this going. Then we have to print money out of thin air to pay them back, to pay the Russians back. Then we're putting sanctions on Russia. Then we're putting sanctions on China, economic sanctions, etc. And meanwhile, I guess because they have, I don't know why, but I'm guessing because they pressure private companies to give away trade secrets or whatever. But I don't see how having a sanction is going to fix that problem. But you can see just how big the mess is. The fact that you have a government agency for every little thing for almost every little thing the free market can do at a better and more efficient cost and rate. I think and you have so many of them. It's just, you saw the list I was reading from A to Z. It's like, all right, the Financial Protection Agency, wow, yeah. So, but that's just to give you an idea of what my podcast show was 2 months. What was it? A month or two ago that I published it on I published the show on Anchor.fm. That's where I did the audio recordings from the show I did 2 months ago. And it was pretty much the same thing what I did right now, but it was just to give you a visual zoom so that I'm not writing it or printing it all out. I'm presenting it to my share screen that you can then see during the course of this live stream. Um, and hopefully I should have another show coming up soon. So I'm Michael J. Long, and again, I thank you for joining me. Again, my name's Michael J. Long. I greatly appreciate it, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.